The ride of your life is daddyhood.
For those of you who cannot wait and love daddyhood, please head over to our Patreon. We have exclusive access to episodes, we have early access to episodes, and we have behind the scenes footage. Head on over there, sign up, be part of the exclusive daddyhood group, and join us over there. Welcome back to Daddyhood. It would not be possible to have a Path to Parenthood without talking about fertility law. Today, I'm honored to have my fertility lawyer here amongst a lot of gay men and women. Rich Vaughn, thank you for joining me.
My pleasure.
And coming on.
Yeah, happy to be here.
So I have a bio and a write-up on you, but I want to get in, obviously to your story too. I mean, you are a family man and a dad.
Yeah.
Did you always knew you were going straight into fertility law, or was that sort of a plot twist?
No, it was a bit of a plot twist. Actually, sort of coincidentally, I ended up studying in law school a little bit about an embryo disposition dispute between divorcing parents, and I thought it was the coolest case I'd ever read. This was back in 1990, and I wrote a paper on it. It was a Tennessee Supreme Court case, and that was the last I heard of anything assisted reproduction for the next 13 years or so. I practiced law in Illinois, moved out to California, met my husband, and then within a year or so of dating, we started talking about kids. And then, we didn't know what we were doing. But friends told us about surrogacy. We're like, what? What is this? How does that work? So we got lots of information about it, went to a local family building show, and found out it was expensive, and we saved our money and waited until the right time. And then when it was time, we had to have a lawyer conversation like you did at the beginning, just to kind of get our head wrapped around everything we were going to have to do. And I found it super engaging. I had just finished a bit of a stint with a startup company, so I was looking for something different, and I was hooked. So I called the lawyer back the next day and said, what's it like to practice in this area? And it was the right time, right place. I ended up working for him.
Love that. And now you're the founder of your own fertility clinic. Here, I'm going to give people a little background.
Yeah.
Rich Vaughn is a parent of twins through surrogacy and egg donation with his husband, and is the founding founder of International Fertility Law Group, and national law practice focused exclusively on assisted reproductive technologies, ART. He chaired the American Bar Association Assisted Reproduction Committee from 2013 to 2018, developing education for ART attorneys both domestically and internationally, developing model legislation for governance of U.S. ART providers, matching program regulations in New York State, and guidelines for international surrogacy, parentage, and citizen rights. He contributes his time, expertise, and leadership abilities in supporting ART advocacy organizations, including SEEDS, ASRM, AAAA, ACAL, all of these letters. What is AAAA?
All the letters of the alphabet. It's the American Academy of Adoption and Art Attorneys. Wow. So there's actually 5 A's, but they only do 4 because they've been known by Quad A.
One extra would be way too much. I'm glad they made that decision. And then this one's easier, the Family Equality Council.
Yeah.
He has presented at numerous legal and family building conferences around the world, on television and radio shows. Now joining us on Daddyhood, Rich Vaughn, thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
All right. I mean, I have so many questions. We just heard sort of how you got into fertility law. But before we get into the legal questions, I do have a dad joke to run by you. So
Awesome.
We do this on every episode.
Okay.
I'm preparing for fatherhood, preparing for dad jokes. So bear with me and entertain me here. How many tickles does it take to make an octopus laugh?
I don't know.
Tentacles.
All right. I almost had it.
It's so good.
Oh my God.
That was I like that one. Oh, I'm becoming a dad slowly but surely.
I have a simple one for you.
Okay, what is it?
When does a joke become a dad joke?
I don't know.
When it's apparent.
That's a good one. Right back at me. That one's better than mine. Gosh. I'm going to have to take so many notes of dad jokes to embarrass my little one.
You can talk to my husband. He's the king.
Is he the king of it?
Oh my God,
Okay.
yeah.
Got it. Is he in law too?
No,
Did I make that
no,
up?
he is
Okay,
a
what
fitness instructor. So
Incredible.
he's been teaching spin for 26 years
A
now.
well-rounded couple.
Yeah.
That's how
yeah.
Jordan has this whole political world that I know nothing about, and our worlds come together in the most beautiful way.
Yeah.
But so polar opposite in sort of our
Yeah, you
careers.
balance each other out.
Yeah.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah. So I think, just first, I didn't know what I was really getting myself into going on this journey of fatherhood.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know even where to start. And we obviously started with Dr. Wingler and California Fertility Partners. And there have been so many contracts and legal documents that I've signed that I truly still even don't understand what I'm signing. I just trust that you're the right man for it and your team. I feel like I'm in very good hands. I'm in good hands.
Yeah.
Has it always been that way? And have documents got more complicated in recent years? When you first began, how much has the landscape changed?
The broad brushstrokes of the legal landscape for the work we do those haven't changed that much.
Yep.
There are some key components to the legal work, but as time passes in this industry and the field evolves, we see where the gaps are, and we fill that with more documentation, and the contracts get a little longer. We add a provision for that scenario that we hadn't thought about before, and for this scenario. So it has evolved, but has it changed in huge ways? Probably not, at least in terms of the documentation.
Got it.
The law has evolved. There are more states now, since I started practicing in this area, more states that have surrogacy legislation, and that's a continuing trend.
Okay. In a good way?
Yeah, in a good way. Yeah.
Okay,
All
good.
very pro surrogacy, pro intended parent,
Yep.
The idea of people being able to be legal parents because they intended to.
Yeah.
You are procreating. You're just using medical technology to do it. Right. So why not honor that intention? So that concept has, taken root, and it's grown quite a bit.
Great. I'm a big fan of that for sure. I think, do you only deal with surrogate? I know we're using you for surrogacy, and you're on our team for that. Do you do adoption as well? Or are you just surrogate? And
when I first started practicing for same-sex couples in particular, the non-bio father had to adopt to get their parentage rights recognized. So we did some second parent and step-parent adoptions, very, very more streamlined adoptions than a traditional type of adoption, but we don't really do adoption. So most of our work now, all of our work is assisted reproduction.
That was one of the questions that I actually had on here, and you just beat me to it. So my question to you is, whoever is the non-biological father, so we're good with that now?
You're good with that now.
So we don't have to legally adopt or sign papers?
No, you don't.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know that changed.
Well, yeah. As the statutes have evolved, even in California, we didn't even have a statute in California until 2013.
Okay.
We had great case law, but no statutes until 2013. So that's evolved. Same-sex marriage has evolved, and so a lot of this has gotten easier over time.
Got it. Well, cool. Where, as people are listening to this and they don't know where to start and they're overwhelmed like I was at the beginning, what's a good place for these people to start? If you're looking, and not only, the LGBTQ plus community that we have, but just everyone out there who's looking to expand their family, when it comes to surrogacy and adoption, where in the legal world, where do they need to begin?
Well, as a lawyer, consulting with and guiding intended parents all the time, I like to say, look, just start. There's no one right way to start. Just start. You can start with the doctor and go down that path and find out from the doctor what medical steps are involved, and they might refer you to lawyers. You can start with an agency. You can start with a lawyer. Most lawyers might say, start with a lawyer. Yeah. I'm not going to be that guy. I do think it's important to start with a lawyer, because it's important to have your head wrapped around all the legal work that's involved in the steps that are going to be taking place.
I think that I would, if I was advising people, and people can take this however they want, I would start with a lawyer. I think, one thing that I felt, and Jordan felt with me, we went into our doctor's office and provided our sample. And immediately after, he his results were good enough to freeze. So we had to go sign paperwork and do our notary. And
Precisely.
I can't tell people, we went in the afternoon and we sort of like, we didn't go in half-assed, but we went in with the assumption of like, we're going to go masturbate into a cup and freeze our sperm and skip out of there and be happy and like, it's good. And we'll be in and out within 45 minutes, pending, how long it takes. But we get in there and we provide our sample. We go into the notary room, and the contract and the questions that are on there drained us. And I mean, and imagine like we were not prepared for that. We were sitting next to each other, having to answer questions like, if your partner dies within 24 hours, who has the right? If your partner dies in 48 hours, if you both pass away, 48, 72 hours. We're having these conversations for the very first time in front of a notary. And I bet you it took us 2 hours just to get through that paperwork, because we were having conversations and making decisions that were not easy decisions to make, including, if we pass while our embryos are frozen, who has access and the right to our embryos? Can they use them? Do they need to be discarded? So that's why I think from my experience, I say start with a lawyer, because I would have loved to have a heads up to be able to have that conversation with my partner before I went and froze. And then all of a sudden you're like, well, we're here, we might as well do it. And that's what happened with us.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. There's certainly a lot of paperwork at all stages of the process, and it starts with the medical. The thing with the medical forms, these are called medical consent forms. The vast majority of those forms will explain the medications and the procedures that will take place. Most of those won't take place on you or be administered to you. It's to the donor and to the surrogate.
Yeah.
But you still have to have an understanding of what's involved, and you give your consent to go forward. But it's that portion of those medical consent forms that talks about your embryos, what you want done with them if you die, if you divorce, if you become incapacitated. Those are important things to think through. You can always sign another set of medical consent forms if you change your mind and you want to change your embryo choices. But yeah, you're right. I tend not to put myself first in almost any situation. So I try not to say, look, the lawyer must be first. But you're right. You're absolutely right. And I have that conversation with clients all the time about what paperwork you're going to be dealing with and when.
Right. From
day one all the way to taking the baby home and a birth certificate. So your point is right on the mark.
Yeah. I think that I can say I would have loved to have a heads up, that. And I think because we didn't meet with you until shortly after that.
Right.
Because we really had no clue what we were getting ourselves into. We were just like, we're going to start somewhere, and this seems like the place to start. And then we sort of built our team.
Yeah. And, you sign those medical consent forms because you kind of have to, right?
Right. We felt stuck.
We were like,
forward. In order to freeze the sperm that day, they needed them signed. So it was sort of like, well, we've already put in all this effort. We're here. We paid for the test. We met with the doctor. We want to keep moving forward. So they sort of have you trapped in like the nicest way possible. And they're there for you. They're there to make sure you're going forward thoughtfully and with all the right paperwork in place. But it is a bit of a pressured situation when you're there and they have forms and you have to sign them and have them notarized. I would say to your listeners, that you do have the right to re-sign a new set if there's something you weren't happy with when you think through it. And you can also take those forms home and review them and sign them later. So just so everybody knows, you do have some options. Incredible.
Yeah.
Do those forms and, can we talk a little bit about fertility law state from state?
Yeah.
And I know you're licensed to practice in California and others, right?
So I personally am licensed in Illinois, New York, and California.
Okay.
And the law firm practices nationwide. And the laws do vary from state to state.
Yep.
In terms of embryo situations or just in general?
Just in general.
Oh, okay.
I think, it's important too, just to know, like, maybe if we can hit on some of the biggest variations from state laws and like what states are more friendly and what states are a little harder to go through this process in.
Yeah. So family law is governed by the states. It's not a federal matter. So I get questions all the time, like, what if so-and-so gets elected into office? Will that change surrogacy law? And it is a state-by-state matter.
Okay.
And generally, the states are very supportive of surrogacy because in this process, people are going forward purposely to create children. They want these children to have homes and legal parents, and and from a state point of view, they want someone who's financially responsible for these children as well. So the states are generally supportive. There are some states where surrogacy is not allowed. Michigan currently does not allow it. When I started practicing, DC and New York also did not allow it. Those states have now come around and now allow surrogacy.
Is Michigan the only state that does not?
Michigan does not allow it. Nebraska also has a weird sort of, I call it schizophrenic law about it. So basically it's not practiced there. Louisiana allows it, but only if it's altruistic. So you cannot pay a surrogate in Louisiana. So that's put a real kibosh on a lot of surrogacy.
Can people go across state borders?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, happens all the time.
Got it.
And we have parents from one state using a clinic in a different state and a surrogate in a different state, even parents from other countries who come here. So,
Yeah, I knew the international is a big thing because we're one of the only, and I don't know how much we want to get into the international stuff, but I know like even, for example, like Europe is going through like with their leadership over there, unfortunately. I know that they, correct me if I'm wrong, they went in and like legally on some birth certificates were like changing the birth father to, the donor. It just got really messy.
There were a number of situations this past summer in Italy where Italy was removing lesbian moms, the non-bio or the non-delivering mother from the birth certificate. So Italy's going far right in this regard. Spain has had an up and down relationship with surrogacy. France has had an up and down relationship with surrogacy, generally trending toward more and more openness toward it. But you still can't do it there. You still can't do surrogacy in most countries of the world. So a lot of people are coming to the U.S. They go to Canada a little bit, where it's also allowed, but only for altruistic purposes.
Got it.
So a lot of folks are sort of, they have to come to the U.S. So it's a growing field here.
Yeah.
But in terms of, back to the states, I think that's the question you were asking. Most states allow surrogacy in various ways. Some states have no law.
Okay.
And so it's just allowed because it's not prohibited.
Got it.
And then you develop custom and practice with the lawyers and the judges in terms of how to get these court orders in place to declare the parents as parents. Some states have just case law where some sort of dispute has gone to court and worked its way up through the courts, and now there's a published ruling on surrogacy. Usually they're very limited and specific to the issue that was being disputed.
Got it.
But it's generally used as a way to allow surrogacy. Some states have legislation, and some states have case law and legislation. So most states allow it in one form or another.
Yep.
There's only probably a third of the states now that have zero law on it, but it's allowed because it's not prohibited.
Right. Incredible. So if you're talking about like the biggest differences, so like take California, for example, and compare it to a Texas when it comes to surrogacy, what are some of like the challenges there? You don't practice in Texas, so I don't know if that's fair to ask.
We have cases in Texas all the time.
Okay.
We have cases all across the country, so I can speak to whatever state you want to talk about. So California has 5 Supreme Court cases on surrogacy, all very intended parent friendly, and it has legislation that's pro surrogacy.
Yep.
Texas has, this is getting into some of the weeds, but it has an old version of what's called the Uniform Parentage Act. I think it's from 1973. And it talks about how to establish parentage in assisted reproduction. And so Texas actually allows surrogacy. It just has a different process to go through when you go to court to get your court order.
Okay.
In California, you can go to court pre-birth, during the pregnancy, and get a court order and have that order become effective right at birth. So kind of nice and easy, one and done. A lot of states follow that model.
Yep.
Texas allows you to go to court pre-birth, but you do this in 2 steps, which I think is kind of funny. It's a 2-step process in Texas.
Of course it is.
Yeah.
It's Texas.
So you go to court pre-birth and you have your contract validated, your surrogacy contract validated by court order, and you get a preliminary order saying that at birth, as long as there's no other disputes, you'll be the parent or parents. Then after the birth, you file a notice with the court and say, hey, judge, baby was born. And then you get a post-birth order that now has the baby's name and date of birth. So in the end, the result is the same. It's just you have to go through a different process. So generally speaking, it's just slightly different hoops to jump through in different states, but the outcome is the same.
Got it. When it comes to this process for both men and women, so is there any differences in the law when it comes to a woman's egg versus a men's sperm?
So there are states that care about genetics. Some states care about marriage. And so we always ask at the beginning of the process, if it's an intended parent couple, we ask if they're married, because there are some states where marriage is required. Oklahoma, Texas, Connecticut makes a difference.
Wow.
Yeah, so there are some states.
So you can't move forward unless you're married?
Correct.
Wow.
Correct. With a surrogate in that state.
Okay.
Now, there may be an option. There's the default rule, the main rule, which is for surrogacy, we go to court in the state where the birth occurs, and we get the court order in that state. But there's an exception to that rule that applies in California, Colorado, Washington, Nevada, and New York that says if your medical procedures occur there, in those favorable states, you can get your court order there and have it honored in the other states. So for some arrangements, it can be a bypass to what might be a more complicated legal process.
Yep.
So as an example, we often will have a California court order for couples that have a clinic in California, and maybe they're surrogates in Missouri or Minnesota or Wisconsin or Texas, and they will take the California court order.
Got it.
So
it's just an easier transfer then.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
So is there any, so for the listeners out there, Jordan and I are going through this in California. Say all of a sudden we want to move to Nebraska. Is our family protected there? Grandfathered in? Like what is like, not that they can't, obviously our child will be born, but can they do anything? Like the states, just because we use surrogacy, is there anything weird about families that move after doing surrogacy?
Not at all. And that's precisely why you want to make sure that you get a court order that says your parents. We have this beautiful clause in our Constitution, U.S. Constitution, that's referred to as the full faith and credit clause, which says that if you have a court order in one state, it must be given full faith and credit in another state.
Incredible.
So, for instance, if a couple were to get divorced in California, they don't have to go get re-divorced in Texas. You have a court order.
Right.
You don't need to go relitigate your issues. So if you have a parentage order, it is entitled to full faith and credit. So if you are the legal parents here in California and you move with your child to Nebraska, you have a court order, you are the legal parents. You'll also have a birth certificate, but it is the court order in assisted reproduction cases that gives you legal rights.
Got it. It's so fascinating. I mean, I have a million questions, but I want to get into what's another unique or unusual thing that you've experienced in your years of practicing fertility law? Is there anything you can share, without giving away? I know obviously there's protections, but has there been any other cases that even if that you haven't managed that you've seen and studied?
Sure. Gosh, there's so many. We often kind of
pick
joke
the
and
weirdest
say,
and strangest.
We should write a
one.
book,
right,
on stuff. At the beginning of COVID, so this is about a surrogacy case. So most of our stories are about surrogacy cases. There are some with donors, but at the beginning of COVID, I had a set of intended parents whose surrogate was pregnant about 7 weeks or so, and they wanted to terminate pregnancy. There was no defect, no abnormality.
The surrogacy did, or the intended parents?
The parents.
Okay.
Yeah, because they were scared about COVID. Nobody knew what to expect from this and how it could affect a pregnancy. In these arrangements, we talk about pregnancy termination, selective reduction. If in the sense of if there's danger to the surrogate, she always has the right to make whatever decision she needs to make. But we also talk about what are the parents' wishes if there's a defect or abnormality or a problem. In this case, there was no problem, no defect. So they
were just scared from COVID.
Scared about what it could be, what impact the virus could have on this early stage of a pregnancy. So,
wow,
it was a serious and valid concern. They asked if she would terminate, and she said no. So we had a whole pregnancy that we were managing with frequent communication and a lot of hand-holding and talking and consulting
Yeah.
throughout, just to kind of keep things going, because she never did, terminate, and baby was born healthy.
And did
A
they?
good ending to the story.
Yeah. Did they stay the parents?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they followed through with everything.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was just a very
Intense time, huh?
yeah, very intense.
Well, I couldn't imagine either because, I have met our surrogate and, her husband, and they're great people. I couldn't imagine during COVID not being able to, have that human connection, one.
Yeah.
But then also just, checking in because I imagine, there's a lot of fear, too, early on with COVID, of being able to check in on your surrogate other than virtual.
Yeah.
So, wow.
Yeah, they weren't in the same state, so it was all going to be
it.
by phone or Zoom or whatever. But a lot of those conversations were sort of attended or mediated, if
Yeah.
you will, so that there was someone present.
Okay.
But they also had their own conversations, so they worked through it.
Yeah.
They worked through it.
Yeah. Well,
So
good. I'm glad it was a positive ending.
yeah.
So let me ask you, if say we go all the way to birth, how protected, and has there ever been pushback for say all of a sudden the egg donor finds out who we are, and not that I'm not by any means an A-list celebrity, but I'm sure there's been cases where somebody that is notable, rich, powerful, famous, whatever it is, has an egg donor, and possibly it gets revealed to the egg donor and they find out who they donated their eggs to.
Mm-hmm.
Has there been any cases where that egg donor comes in and fights for rights of the child and or compensation past what was already in the contract?
None that I'm aware of.
Okay.
These are
Pretty tight.
Pretty tight, very straightforward arrangements where literally from the moment of the egg retrieval, the eggs belong to the intended parents. Any embryos created are theirs, and any children resulting from that process are theirs. So super clear. The law is supportive of that concept as well. I'm not aware of any cases where an egg donor has tried to come back and claim any kind of rights or ask for more money. Has it happened out there? It's possible. I'm not all seeing. I don't know all the cases that are out there.
Yeah.
And to the extent that something crazy like that could have happened, it might have come up and then just been quashed, and it never amounted to anything.
Got it.
Certainly. The way that the law works, if there's a dispute, you take it to court, and at the trial level, there's no published opinions. But if you then appeal, then that goes to an appellate court. Then there's a published opinion. So it really has to be a significant, long-standing dispute to get to a place where you might have some sort of published court record.
Got it. What percentage-wise do you think intended parents stay anonymous in the egg?
It's a great question, and that has changed a lot since
Has it?
I started. Yeah,
Okay.
Since I started in 2006.
In what ways?
Well, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, the vast majority of egg donation arrangements were anonymous. You kind of go back to 30, 35 years ago, 40 years ago when egg donation first started, or 35 years ago. And the only model that anyone had to work from was sperm donation, which was traditionally anonymous. There were always known sperm donors, but most of the sperm donor transactions were through sperm banks, and it was all anonymous. So that was how egg donation started. And I think there probably was initially some fear that if they knew each other, that the donor could come knocking on their door and saying, "I'm the mommy," or the parents could come knocking on the donor's door and saying, "Here, take him," or crazy time. But that never really bore itself out. And I think the fears faded away with time as we realized that these were safe arrangements. Everybody's privacy was actually being respected. So the fear went away. But I think as 23andMe and Ancestry.com and websites like that and services like that have expanded, and people are aware of it, we realize there's really no such thing as anonymity. Number one, so why try to pretend there's going to be? It's really easy with a little bit of information to find someone.
Right.
But the other thing that we've learned over the last 40, 50 years from closed adoptions is that when you have a closed adoption, it's being different than assisted reproduction, but when you have a closed adoption and the child can't access any information about the birth parents, that creates a black hole of curiosity.
Yep.
Not that they necessarily want or need a relationship with their birth parents, but not knowing, not being able to know, can be harmful. And
Jordan and I actually have a folder already
Yeah.
on our iCloud of both pictures of our egg donor and the video that we have from the agency and our surrogate. So we're already collecting just for when our child has questions, we can have some sort of answers. So we're already sort of doing that collecting piece right now.
Yeah. So, I mean, in an egg donation situation like yours, even with an anonymous arrangement, you have a lot of information about the donor that you can share with your child and children. So it's not as if there's a complete black hole, but I think a lot of people are more mindful that because anonymity is sort of a myth in this regard, why shy away from it and leave the door open possibly to communication? I think most people are respectful of the arrangement. We don't have a lot of, phone calls or emails that say, well, my donor tried to reach out.
Right.
So I think the fear has subsided.
I want to go back on something, and I have a follow-up question that might be a little scary. I'm even scared to ask it. So 23andMe.
Yeah.
If our egg donor is on 23andMe, if our kid takes a DNA test, they'll know.
It's a very good chance.
Okay.
Yeah. I've never gotten on 23andMe or Ancestry.com, so I don't, know all the details about how it works.
So she all of a sudden one day could open up her 23andMe app and it's showing like she has a child, like a percentage match of a...
Yeah, what we would call a donor offspring. Or donor conceived.
Yeah.
So there's that possibility.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't want to...
And it's happening a lot now with sperm donors.
I was going to say, I mean, I'm sure that's like, my mind's blown right now.
Yeah.
And I never want to tell my kid to not do something, but I'm like, please don't take that DNA test, because it's like privacy, in my opinion, and it's going to sound really weird for somebody who's been on reality television, but like, to me now, the ultimate currency in my life is privacy. Mm-hmm. I mean, money, all of that, like you've been through it all, like the way that our society is moving, I want to protect my data. I want to protect my life, my family. Yeah. And like that is a lot of data to put out there into the world.
It is. It's a lot of information to absorb too. If you get on Ancestry.com or 23andMe and you make some sort of connection online, you find a person. And what do you do with that? So, there's... And
I'm sure there's been some great stories that are healing and helpful from those apps and from that data. But I'm on the other side of it now where I'm like, oh, that can be a little intense.
So by contrast, my husband and I decided to be known in our donation arrangement. The donor was open to that. So we put our full names in the contracts. And we have her address and all that other information. Our kids are 15. We've never reached out to her and vice versa. We've respected each other's privacy. No one's looking for a relationship here. Our kids were curious about their egg donor once they kind of got old enough to understand what that all meant.
Yeah.
And we shared the profile and the pictures and everything that we had.
Yeah.
And they were fascinated. They were just, they thought it was exotic,
That's awesome.
But they've not expressed any desire to meet the donor.
Okay.
In our contract,
because we signed our contract as intended parent 1 and intended parent 2, right?
Yeah, so
that's how our...
And ours was with names. So,
and yours, you had just
Rich Vaughn. Just put it out there. Part of it was, just be honest, in the law firm where all this information was going to be held anyway, I was never going to pretend like I would never go look. So let's just face reality. But actually, it was the guidance of our egg donation agency where they suggested that we consider this, and I'm glad we did. But our situation is very different.
So when you were doing that, though, you were sort of the first. I mean, because you said originally when surrogacy was happening, it was very anonymous, and then so now you were sort of one of the first to be public about it. Not public, but
we were part of a small percentage. I would say 16, 17 years ago, just in our practice, we would see maybe 5% of the cases were open.
Wow.
And 95% were anonymous.
Yeah.
And there was no such thing as something in between.
Right.
And now we have anonymous, we have semi-open, and fully open as sort of 3 different categories of egg donation arrangements. So it's evolved quite a bit.
Let's talk through those 3 real quick.
Yeah.
So what are, lay them out again, and then sort of if you can just quickly give me a definition of what semi-open, open, and then closed are.
Yeah. So closed or anonymous would be just like yours, where the intended parents are intended parent 1 and 2, and the donor is donor 1, 2, 3, 4.
Right.
Right. And no names in the contract. Only the attorneys and the clinic and the agency have the names of the parties.
Which, by the way, even I'll just put this out there too, for those who, don't know, we obviously sort of have like a database of women, and they used a number. She was number something, 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 and we sent that back to her and say, we're interested in this number. So we've never seen her name either.
Right. Right. So that's pretty common.
Got it.
And most egg donor agencies and even clinics that have donor programs, their database is structured around the number system.
Okay.
So to protect everyone's privacy. And then if the parties are willing to open it up in any way, then you can discuss how and when to exchange further information.
Got it.
So on the other end of the spectrum is fully open, where you might put everyone's names in the contract.
That was yours.
And that was ours. Yeah.
Okay.
And then in between, there's no one definition for what falls in between. And some agencies have more defined categories. Some clinics have defined categories. So it really is kind of up to the parties as to what they would like to do, unless the agency or the clinic has a defined category. But one example would be if it's a semi-open, something in between, draft the contracts and do everything without names, and then agree perhaps to exchange some kind of contact information or create some mechanism for contact after a birth. Because what's the point of staying in touch if a child never results?
Right.
So after a birth, maybe exchange names if that's what you want to do, or exchange anonymous email addresses so you have a way to communicate directly.
Yep.
You can always still communicate indirectly through the agency or the lawyers or the clinic.
Yeah.
Some will sign up at a place called Donor Sibling Registry.
Okay.
It's a third-party company. Kind of think of it as a Facebook portal for messaging, but it can be anonymous or known, whatever you want to. But you would sign up as intended parent 1 and 2, and the donor would sign up as donor 1, 2, 3, 4.
What's the point of that?
Well, it's another mechanism for the communication. So you can message each other through this portal. The idea being
For health. Or
health. Usually it's health information.
Okay. Because that was something Jordan and I discussed too, is like, what if something comes up when our child is 4 or 5 that is like medically related, that the doctor then asks for medical records that maybe she didn't fully disclose to the agency?
Right. Well, that's already covered
Okay.
in the egg donation agreement, that if there's a need for medical information in the future, she agrees to provide it.
Got it.
It's always done through the clinic or the agency or the lawyers, unless the parties are known to each other.
Okay.
But the donor sibling registry, some people like the idea because donors might donate multiple times, and so there's a way to connect all the dots.
Got it.
If they're on the registry. Other parents will say to us, well, what if your law firm's not around in 10 years? Or the clinic's not around in 20 years, or the agency's not around, and they don't have this intermediary to facilitate the contact. So this idea of another third-party company gives some people some comfort. I mean, I guess the argument is, what if that agency or that registry is not around? I mean,
I was gonna say.
It's not a perfect solution, but it's another option.
Got it.
For facilitating communication.
Yeah, because I know we're on a text with our surrogate, and we've kept the agency's contact that's overseeing her on the text too, just to be transparent. And she rarely chimes in, if at all, but like she sends us pictures when she was doing all of her medication. We did a mock trial with her just to like make sure everything was good to go. And it's been really good to see the pictures give us a little bit more of a glimpse into her life.
And that you have with a surrogate.
Right.
It's not often the case you have that with a donor, even with a known donor.
Right.
The cycle and the whole process is so much shorter.
Yeah.
With an egg donor.
Look, I mean, obviously, you're incredibly knowledgeable when it comes to fertility and when it comes to law. So, dad question for you.
Yeah.
How did you and your partner decide who is dad, and what do your kids call you?
Daddy and Papa.
Daddy. Okay.
Yeah.
So I wanted to do Papa, but Jordan had put his foot down. He would not be Papa. So if there's going to be a Papa, it's going to have to be me.
Yeah.
So we're trying to work through that. I like Dad and Dada. So
Okay.
Pops is another one that's on the table.
We're
trying to figure out the names right now.
We have some friends that went daddy and dada,
Okay.
which I thought sounded way too close. Like
He just said that to
when
me
someone's
today.
yelling at you down the hall, how can you tell sometimes? I don't know.
Right.
So I thought daddy growing up, right? I wanted to be called daddy. But when the idea of papa came up, I was like, oh, wow, I kind of like the sound of that. I had some clients who told me that. We were in court on their step-parent adoption to get the non-bio parental rights. And he said they called him papa. And I'm like, I like that.
Yeah.
And then, our nannies, they spoke Spanish, so they used papa a lot. And actually they said papa first before daddy. So anyway, but we just kind of fell into that. We didn't have any preconceived notion. We figured we'd have some time, and it just kind of happened.
Do you have your nannies speak to them in Spanish?
We did.
Okay.
We did.
We have friends of ours who have their nannies only communicate with the children in Spanish.
I think that's great.
Because I would have rather that than I took 5 years of Spanish, 4 in high school and 1 attempt in college. And I heard though, it's much easier to retain and to learn as a kid than older. So I was like,
I've heard the same thing. So
maybe we
I
do the
agree
same
with
thing.
you. Yeah.
I know
it's great to have that exposure. I think, we don't, live in just our little bubble. We live in a global environment. So it's important.
Yeah. And I think obviously it's a little privileged to be able to have that opportunity even in today's society. But I think, if you have the opportunity to have somebody in your life or in your family speak a different language to your child, I see only valuable things to come from that.
Fast forward a few years, and my kid is somewhat struggling with Spanish, but we didn't keep it up. But that was our fault, not his. So,
that was me in college. I was like, I cannot do this anymore. I tried. I gave it a good try.
To his credit, though, he did really well in his final exam. So if he ever hears this,
good. I was a bad test taker, so I did not do good in my final exams ever. I want to get into just some maybe some myths or misconceptions about fertility law, but what's interesting too is not only are you a lawyer, you are a dad and a successful parent to surrogate babies. So what is maybe a misconception about dads, and what is a misconception in the fertility law world?
I think my own misconception was that with 2 dads, who was going to fill the role of the maternal role, right? So on that level, I was actually really happy to have our nanny, who actually, it was a 2 for 1, 2 for the price of 1. She brought her niece, so there was two of them,
women,
and it was great. So they got, and I realized between that and the teachers and all the other women that were in their lives, they had plenty of maternal roles to look to. And, each parent takes on certain responsibilities, and you take on, there's the harder, disciplined one, and always disciplining the kids, and there's the one who's, softer. And so you kind of balance off of each other. And so I think the kids still get a full experience. I think I was my own misunderstanding of am I putting the kids at a deficit by not having a mom in play? But
so one of the things that came up is just with Jordan and I both being men, is how do you have that sort of maternal? So we thought about having 2 godmothers to have sort of that female energy around.
That's really cool.
So that was definitely something that came up. So how about fertility law? What's a misconception that you think, something that might be misunderstood?
Well, a question I get a lot at the beginning of the conversations with new clients is, can the surrogate take the baby? What happens if the surrogate takes the baby? We've never had that happen. We've never had a surrogate refuse.
Got it.
To, turn over the child or to give up parental rights, So there are definitely horror stories out there that anyone can find online if they want to dig deep enough. But those horror stories, those misconceptions, those myths, well, they're not all myths. There are some horror stories that actually did happen, but typically it's where people skipped important steps in the process.
And they're rare.
Didn't cross their T's and didn't dot their I's, and they are rare.
Yep.
They're very rare. This is usually a very loving and, again, life-affirming kind of experience for everyone involved. If it's done right and done well, where everybody has, full education, orientation to what they're getting into before they do it.
Yeah.
And they have support.
I have a weird case that came up. So Jordan actually asked me this question. I didn't know either, but has there ever been a case in which the surrogate got pregnant and maybe didn't know if it was the embryo transfer or maybe had sex leading up to that week and like needed to do a DNA test while they were pregnant because they didn't follow the rules? Because I'm assuming one of the rules by the doctor is no sex for a couple of weeks leading up to the transfer. Yeah. So has that ever come across your desk?
Let's say I've had situations where we did find out that the surrogate was pregnant and got pregnant on her own. Usually that gets discovered pretty early in the process because during the surrogate's medication cycle,
right,
they're going to be monitoring her, taking blood tests, doing ultrasounds, that kind of thing. And if the levels are off because she got pregnant on her own, they'll typically know that.
Okay.
So
it would have to be perfect timing for them to like just miss it.
Yeah. Now there was a case, I don't know all the details of this, but not all that long ago, within the last year and a half, where a surrogate was pregnant with twins. One was the intended parent's baby and one was her genetic child. Yeah.
How did they do that?
Ask the doctor. I don't know.
No. I mean, like legally. So then did they just split the babies at birth?
Well, legally, the way that you'd handle it is if that's her genetic child, then she's the parent of that child, she and her husband.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Kind of a freaky, like 1 in a 10 million chance kind of case.
Wow.
Yeah.
This has been incredible. I need to have you on for part 2.
Okay.
So we'll do that.
Good. Because I'm like, Dr. Ringler gets a part 2? What about me?
Dr. Ringler's been through it with us for these last 2 years with all the medical stuff. I had some fertility issues at the beginning, so my sperms weren't very alive. Jordan was good to go. So we have a lot to talk through there.
Yeah, I had the same. Mine were fine, but not anywhere near as good.
Yeah.
And so they're like, oh, mine are better than yours. Yeah.
I was like, I pride myself on being healthy. How the hell are those my numbers?
Happens. So at least you figured it out.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I can keep going on for days. We'll definitely have you back on, but I want to close out. We close all of these with some parenting words of wisdom. It can be anything from something someone taught you to what you and your partner are doing in your family.
Yeah.
Leave us with some wisdom for moms, dads, and tender parents out there.
Oh, gosh. Well, what they, the proverbial they, always say is true, that it goes by really fast.
Yeah.
So treasure all those moments. But most importantly, when you get overloaded with lots of gifts and clothes, put them on them quickly, because they grow out of it. So, every stage goes by more quickly than you expect. You kind of just get, for me at least, I got used to this stage and got good at it, and then suddenly you're on to the next stage. And that's true emotionally and developmentally, but also physically as they grow, and they grow fast. So if you think you're saving that cute little baby outfit for that perfect event, don't. Just put it on them.
Because it ain't going to fit.
Yeah.
I love that. And that's what I'm looking forward to just with this series as a whole, is there's so many steps. I've learned already so much from, people like you that have, made this your profession and contributing to society and an important role on our team, I know. And I can't thank you enough for contributing to expanding our family. And also just educating people out there, because, there's been so many times where middle America, still doesn't really fully understand. They're like, wait, who's the mom?
Yeah.
And
exactly.
what's going on?
Yeah.
And they think the egg donor and the surrogate are the same people. So what I am looking forward to with this is just bringing people along with the ride. And that is going to go possibly, depending on how my sleep cycle is at the time, through, our baby's birth and through childhood. So, well, thank you for coming on. And I cannot wait to have you back on for part 2.
My pleasure. I'm looking forward to it.
The ride of your life is daddyhood.